Harden, Member Provincial Parliament for Ottawa Centre. We're so glad you joined us. This is an important conversation we're having tonight about a subject that's troubling on many levels, the notion that people are being evicted during one of the worst health crises we've faced in recent memory. But I've got a sliver of good news for you. We've got some fantastic panelists to shed light on this discussion from a variety of perspectives. So you've come to the right place. If you want to contribute to debate and discussion that'll lead to organizing and activism of what we can do to stop COVID evictions, what we can do to fight for affordable housing. But I went too far already without acknowledging where I sit and the land on which we stand here, where we're broadcasting this event. So here I am in our community office, which is at 109 Catherine Street, which sits on the unsurrendered and unceded territory of our friends, the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. We want to begin, as we always do, by acknowledging that, by also acknowledging our friendship, the learning we're continuing to do. And I would like to think that a conversation about housing and how we look after each other and how we take care of each other is actually apropos for a real discussion, not a flimsy one about the obligations of reconciliation. So I want to thank our Algonquin and Anishinaabe friends for their friendship and acknowledge that we're trying to proceed tonight in a good way. We have a fantastic array of speakers, as I already mentioned, and we are going to be having opportunity to listen to you as you comment and as you take this conversation in. I want to just talk about everybody who's with us, and then I'm going to throw the microphone to a good friend who joins us from the great city of Toronto. So we have with us my friend Jessica Bell, Member of Provincial Parliament for University Rosedale. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Jessica. We also have with us Katie Burkholder Harris, who's involved as a leading researcher with the Alliance to End Homelessness here in Ottawa. We are also joined by Alexandra Woods, who is teacher in the Ottawa Carleton District School Board, as well as Yahia, Marissa, and Hassan, who are students that Alexandra has worked with, particularly on this issue, showing incredible leadership in helping us demonstrate the lived reality of what COVID evictions has meant and why they have to end. My friend Mavis Finnemore, who's also with us from Acorn, Ottawa Acorn, terrific organizer. So we have, as you can already tell, a variety of different angles that we can explore this subject. But Jessica, to throw to you first, could you, as our party's housing critic, I should have mentioned that too right off the top, could you give us a bit of a sense from where you stand, from what you've seen at the legislature, from what you're hearing from Ontarians about the severity of evictions, particularly in this moment of pandemic?
Thanks for inviting me, Joel, and a nice meeting all you Ottawans. It's really, what is so terrifying is that the pandemic has created the greatest gap, economic gap, between the haves, investors, people who own assets, and people who don't in the history of Canada. We have a huge economic divide, and it is renters that are being left behind. What's really so upsetting is that there are so many of the people who rent are our frontline workers, our delivery drivers, our people who work in supermarkets, the people that we clap and applaud. But unfortunately, many people of these people are also renters, and they're really struggling. We hear the argument that rents have gone down, but actually they might have softened in a few small areas, but overall, rents are still exceptionally expensive, and people are paying well over a third of their income or more just to have a home, and those homes are often too small and they're not properly maintained. And what is also very concerning around the eviction piece is there are some people who are doing their best but are still falling behind financially. In Toronto, approximately 10% of renters have fallen behind and are in arrears. I'm not sure, I'd love to hear if you have those statistics in Ottawa. And unfortunately, what happens right now when you are facing the threat of an eviction is that you can be evicted. The Ontario government has lifted the eviction moratorium. We had it temporarily, but when the stay-at-home order was lifted, the eviction ban lifted with it. And we are also finding that the Landlord Tenant Board system, which is gone online, is broken. They are fast-tracking hearings. The hearings are unfair. The majority of landlords have legal representation. The majority of tenants don't. It is very chaotic. Sometimes hearings are just 5 minutes long. And what we're seeing anecdotally is that landlord applications to evict are moving to the front of the queue, but very real urgent needs that tenants have. Maybe they're being locked out. Maybe they have emergency work that needs to be done. Maybe their landlord is harassing them. They're being pushed to the back of the queue. The system is broken. It needs to change. We are the ones that are going to have to change it.
So, Jessica, can you enlighten us a little bit about what has specifically been done under the current government, under the Ford government, to speed up the evictions process? I remember when I was in the legislature most recently last week, hearing one of our colleagues, MPP Suze Morrison, talk about someone who was evicted in less than a minute and a half. I mean, I struggle to imagine how that kind of cutthroat pace has been brought to bear. But what is, our whole life has moved online. Apropos this meeting, normally we'd be having a town hall, sharing food, having this conversation. But what changes has the Ford government made to speed up the pace of COVID evictions?
There's one main thing this government has done to speed up evictions. They passed a bill called Bill 184. Now, what Bill 184 does is, if you are fallen behind on paying your rent, and the landlord approaches you, usually just before the actual landlord-tenant board hearing, and they'll say to you, let's make a deal. We'll come up with a new rental repayment program. Maybe you owe $3,000 and you pay it back over 6 months, or whatever it is, and you sign an agreement to that rental repayment program. Then you have lost your right to go back to the landlord-tenant board and actually get a hearing if you fall behind again. If you fall behind, the landlord could just submit a piece of paper, it gets stamped, and then the sheriff can come and evict you. So that is the main way they have sped up the eviction process. If you have fallen behind on arrears, if you are facing an eviction, please contact your local legal clinic or your local MPP office and get advice before you make any decisions about a rental repayment plan, because there are consequences to that.
I mean, it sounds very analogous to what non-unionized workers have to deal with when they are, sequestered by an employer and said, "Could you please agree to these terms?" It's not an equal relationship. I mean, a lot of tenants are going to feel compelled to want to sign these agreements.
You are correct, Joel. People who are in arrears are often very scared because they think the landlord-tenant board is going to evict them anyway. So they'll agree to sign anything. They're usually desperate. And as I mentioned, most tenants, when they go to the landlord-tenant board, have no legal representation. So they agree to sign. Please contact your legal clinic and see what your options are before you do. And it also speaks to the very real need that we need to change the laws of this province to level the playing field and make things more fair for renters. We deserve to have a safe and affordable home.
Fair enough. And I want to shift now, Katie, over to you, because Jessica posed the question and deserves a good, well-researched answer, and I know you have that. How do you see the COVID eviction crisis impacting our city here in Ottawa? What have you seen around homelessness? What have you seen around policy changes being made in Toronto and how it's impacted us as a city?
I think I can probably repeat everything that Jessica just said, and seeing it play out here. I know one of the questions was around what the data looks like here. And actually we're lower in terms of the percentage of people at risk of eviction right now because of COVID arrears, but it still amounts at the most conservative end to about 2,500 households. And so when you think about that, our homelessness system is 2,000 people every night. If even a very small portion of those households trickle down into the shelter system, first of all, that has a massive impact when it comes to overcrowding and the ability to get the virus under control. But as well as the instability that's often caused by that is huge. And so we've also seen, due to a lot of things, but evictions as well as fear of staying in overcrowded spots, more and more people sleeping outside. We're now seeing that number start to decrease a little bit. But sort of all these kind of pieces coming together, we've also seen outbreaks happen within the shelter and the homelessness system. And the shelters in particular, I think one really tragic story that just speaks to how all these pieces are so connected. One of the challenges in the long-term care home was actually a personal support worker who was staying in a shelter because we are not paying people enough for a basic human right. And so all these kind of pieces certainly impact each other. But I think to Jessica's point as well, Bill 184 has been just feels like a bomb going off in our housing system in terms of how it is pushing people towards eviction much, much faster. And they really did sneak it in right in August, right after the moratorium ended. I think people barely had their feet under them at that point. CERB was starting to end, I think, in September, and it really just added this piece onto what's happening in a way that people can't recover from. And across Ontario, I'm also the chair of the Ontario Alliance to End Homelessness. Across Ontario, the data we're seeing is about 5 to 7%. So Toronto's a bit higher, but 5 to 7% Ontario-wide of people at risk of just COVID evictions is 105,000 households. So when we think of that number, like the total Canadian experiences of homelessness per year is 235,000. If we even think of what that could start to look like as that hits our community, as it hits our systems, we can't manage that. And people can't stay safe if they can't stay home. People can't move forward, thrive, be a part of community when they don't have a safe place to stay. So the impacts of this are already happening, but they're going to continue to ripple for a long time. And I think a key piece of all this is going to be the evictions crisis and what actually happens to resolve that and support people effectively.
Okay, goodness. Okay, Katie, thank you for that. As disturbing as that is, particularly the story you recounted that comes from Dr. Jeffrey Turnbull's testimony to the Long-Term Care Commission. Back in December, there was a journalist who read through the testimony and discovered exactly what you talk about, that folks who are working hard in a long-term care system were staying in one of our shelters. And that should give us pause to think. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And where are we at, Katie, as I get ready to bring in a fantastic grassroots perspective here? The amount of folks who are choosing to sleep rough in our city, sleep outside. I've heard numbers range between 100 to 200 people a night. Well, what's your sense of that?
So the last I definitely knew it was 190, and that was probably a month or so ago. And today I heard from a city staff member that the numbers are starting to go down again. So that's not a great concrete number, but you're right in that 100 to 200 range. Prior to the pandemic, it was under 100. So we've seen it double basically during the pandemic. And, you know, word on the ground from a lot of folks was, I don't want to go to shelter because I'm scared, or I don't want to hurt my friends. Right? People not wanting to spread the virus to other people in their community. And I think that just speaks to just the sense of community that there is, but also just a real fear. And that's despite best efforts by all service providers to ensure protocol. But at the same time, this is a dynamic that people didn't feel they could control. And without a home and without a focus on housing as part of the solution, we just weren't able to see people be supported enough to stay safe in that way.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. Alexander Woods, I want to pass to you and a fantastic group of students you had the pleasure to work with, Yahia, Marissa, and Hassan, who are with us tonight. So, Alexander, I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit, because I had the occasion to sit in once on the class discussion you were having on COVID evictions and to hear about the campaign you folks launched. Take folks who are watching this to take them through what you were working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm going to hand it over to Yahya to talk a little bit about our project. It was very much responsive to student voice and trying to amplify their voice and the skills that they had. So I'm going to throw it over to Yahya to explain the project, and then maybe I can explain a little bit of the approach and how we navigated the networking and community building and that piece of it.
Brilliant. Sorry if I got that wrong. Brilliant. Over to you, Yahya.
Hi, Joel. Thanks for having us, first of all. And I'll just start off by talking about who we are and what the project is. So basically, the project was initiated by students in our individuals and families in Canada course at Adult High School. It was created with a goal of raising awareness towards the issue of housing insecurity in Ottawa, because with a survey in our class, we found that 25% of students have experienced housing insecurity in the past. So that made us really feel like it was an important issue and it needed to be addressed. And what our project basically is about. So we had the chance to like do a few things shortly after starting it as a class. We started off, we wrote a song with the help of a Canadian singer or / songwriter, Craig Cardiff. And we paired that with a video, which it was created with the help of Jesse Card and Ian Benjamin from Ottawa Youth Group. And we basically made that as a way of raising awareness. We also partnered with members from the Alliance to End Homelessness, Catherine McKinney and Joel Harden, you. And we also partnered with the Worldwide Hearing Foundation, which helped us distribute personal protective equipment, PPE, to the homeless in Ottawa.
Mhm.
And we finally created a social media account to help kind of raise or bring more awareness or publicize our movement more. Um, we found that there are many reasons that could result in homelessness, but a very common reason was uh, it was sorry, it was lack of unaffordable housing, because
Mhm.
as soon as COVID hit us, many people lost their jobs,
Mhm.
and it kind of resulted in their inability to find affordable housing.
Mhm.
And another minor issue is really just lack of knowledge, because like people might not be well informed that the government like can help, and it has some programs that can assist you with finding affordable housing. Like for example, there's a rent bank in Ottawa,
Mhm.
but people may not just they may not know how to like access it. And like I mentioned earlier, 25% of students in our class have experienced it in the past. So two of them are here to share our stories with us.
So thank you for all of that, my friend. So could you, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it bears thinking about that. We just heard from Katie a moment ago, who talked about the provincial number being 5 to 7% of the 14 million people who live here, either homeless or at risk of homelessness. And you said in what you just told us that 25% of students at the adult high school in Ottawa have either experienced it or are living it. What do you think explains the number at the adult high school being so much higher than the provincial average?
Sorry if I wasn't clear, but I meant 25% of students in our class have experienced it. Because
Yeah, no, still, I mean, I think that I'm floored by that number. And if you don't mind me just quickly speculating before throwing back to you, I mean, do you think that a lot of the people who are your classmates who worked on this incredible project are some of the people who have been experiencing the worst of these COVID evictions? Am I wrong in making that assumption?
absolutely not.
Okay. I just think we should sit with that number for a second. That's a significant difference.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for telling me that. So who are we going to next? Yeah.
So we'll go. Zen, should we just get to Marissa's story, or?
Sure.
Well, maybe can we talk a little bit just about the context? Because I think, excuse me, what Joel mentioned is pretty significant. And really, this project was a response to context.
Mhm.
And thinking this was a 2.5-week project. That's the amount of time we had to do it.
Mhm.
It was at the end of our course. We wanted to do something instead of just talking about issues and challenges that students are experiencing. And so really it kind of evolved and was responsive based on both experiences students were having at adult high school, but also really to focus on kind of a skill-based approach, as opposed to with our condensed kind of COVID cohorted model, we have limited time to teach. So, it's an appalling number, really representative of where we don't know. We didn't do we didn't have a chance to do a wider survey at the school, but for sure, a lot of students at adult high school are working, frontline jobs.
Mhm.
They have families. They're trying to go to school. So they are groups that are impacted by COVID evictions. So I think
Okay.
just to think about that, how it was responsive to context, how the students basically took the lead, and that this is an opportunity in education for students to make a change and to be leaders in the community, as opposed to kind of reverting back to this banking model of education or current COVID context. And this is just such an incredible example of me just amplifying their skills. We have many activists in our class already who were involved in activist communities. So, as just something to think about in terms of future projects, and hoping to continue on with something like this with our classes in the future. But we do have these two students who are here also tonight to share their stories. A big part of the project was a social media campaign and was trying to bring awareness to this issue, because I think it's very easy to close our doors if we're isolating and also close our eyes to what's happening outside on the streets and what's happening to people who are living in different situations. So I'm so happy that we have two students here who are happy to share their stories tonight with us. Marissa, do you want to begin?
Yeah, sure. I just want to thank you for inviting me today. It's a great opportunity. Just a little backstory. It was 2019 when my family and I got evicted from our subsidized housing. It wasn't something that I knew about or could have been able to plan ahead for. It was kind of just like a rushed moment at 9 a.m. just being kind of woken up by barged in by the sheriff.
Wow.
Yeah. So ever since then, since that time, me and my family and I, we moved around from about 4 or 5 places, just family and friends' houses and stuff. And during that time, I was currently fresh out of high school. I didn't get my diploma yet, so I was planning to go to adult high school. And I didn't have a job at the time either, so I was kind of left just stuck, not knowing what to do, confused. Also handling personal family issues that was occurring at the time too. So it was hard, but what made it even harder was when COVID hit in March, around this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
I was still looking for a place to live, but ever since COVID hit, and now that this was this big thing, the focus was no longer on people facing homelessness or were already homeless. It was just a strong need to focus on CERB was coming out and unemployment, people that were now losing their jobs, not to take away from their issue as well, but that's what was the main focus at the time. So it just added on another layer of hardship for me. It was only when I reached out to ISB, the Youth Services Bureau of Ottawa, is when I was able to find housing, but it did take a lot of time. I was 18 at the time, and I only got a place at the YSB when I turned 19, a couple months after I turned 19, actually. But ever since then, I would call constantly, and there was never an opening available. So just there was just a lot of things that I had to face at a very young age and wasn't not prepared for at all. But yeah, I just feel it's such a strong topic that people don't like to talk about because it's not them. They're not in my shoes or another person's shoes that is facing this. But I do feel it needs to be talked about, and not just on it needs to be talked about on a regular basis until we start seeing changes for people that are in my shoes or people that have been in worse shoes than I am. But yeah, I feel for me, at least, it was a struggle being only 18 years old and not knowing where I'm going to sleep the next day. And then, having to go to school and kind of just leave my problems at the door. It did take a toll on my grades, and it took a toll on the relationships in my life. And even just me alone, it took a toll on my mental health, because not being able to get that help is very tough. As I think Yahia said that a lot of people don't know who to reach out to in situations like this, and I was one of those people that didn't have any adults around me that could guide me. So it was kind of just I was just going with the flow in every situation and just hoping for the best. So I feel putting those spreading that awareness of letting people know that there are these things and there are these people that are there to help you, if you ever do need the help, is so important. Very, very important.
Well, thank you, Marissa, for sharing all of that. It is disturbing to hear about what you had to put up with. We're really glad you're here.
Thank you.
And for anybody watching this who may be experiencing some of what Marissa has talked about, I want you to know that our MPP office and any politician's office should be there to help you. So I'll just mention before throwing back to Alexandra that our website's joelharden.ca. Our phone number is 613-722-6414. And we certainly can refer you to great community services like Youth Services Bureau and others to help you if you're in the same situation. But Marissa, thank you so much for being with us and showing us this kind of leadership today. We really appreciate it. Hassan, is it over to you next, my friend? I'm not sure if your mic's on there. Let's see. No, it doesn't appear to be working. That's okay. Technology is a fickle friend. I'm hearing from people on the comments room that this mic isn't working very well.
Can't hear.
How's that? Doesn't appear to be working. Maybe what we can do is take a quick pause as you work on the technology piece there, Hassan. And Alexandra, I'll throw back to you. And I'm wondering if what we can do too in the comment stream here is put a link. Alexandra, is the video you folks worked on available online?
It is. It's available through the OCDSB website.
Okay.
So I can share. I shared that that link with your office earlier. I can find it as well.
Okay, great.
There's also a link on the OCDSB Experiential Learning website. There's a blog that I wrote about the project.
Okay.
I didn't mention previously, but we were so lucky to have the support of the OCDSB Experiential Learning. Cam Jones, Youth Ottawa was incredible. I mean, the students wrote the lyrics, co-wrote the lyrics to a song over the course of a week, recorded it remotely through Soundtrap, which is this kind of it's kind of like a puzzle. You each record your piece and then you edit it together with Craig Cardiff, who's a Juno-nominated singer-songwriter. At one point, it was Saturday night from 8. We were on recording again from 8 until 10:30. All of these students, taking time away from their job, from their families, after being at school all day to do this. And then also working so closely with Jesse Card from Youth Ottawa, who helped us to produce a music video. So a lot of the shots in the music video were actually taken by students. So we talked about, Jesse introduced our class to kind of how to create images that were representations, so symbolic for different feelings and experiences. And each verse was written by a different student and reflects their experience. So the music video I'll make available. I'll send it to you guys. And the blog also, there are some student testimonials on there.
Oh, great.
But I think it really reflects kind of the need to continue focusing on this issue, especially because there's so many students at adult in particular who are dealing with this issue of housing insecurity. And the other really special part about our high school, it's a regular day school, but many students have degrees and have previous work experience and lived experience. And so they come to the classroom and really it's a reciprocal relationship, so the students are teaching other students, and really it's about, supporting that community. And it was really incredible to see a lot of this happened when we were on lockdown in virtual learning. So, the connections, I don't know, I felt like the community that was formed through the virtual environment, just through sharing stories and being there for each other was really quite powerful. I felt very privileged to be a part of that and just to be able to learn alongside the students. So it's definitely something we want to continue working towards. So we would be very happy if you watched the music video, shared it widely, and also really grateful for any community connections to continue working on this project.
Right on. Great shout out there to Youth Ottawa, to Craig Cardiff, to the OCDSB. Thank you to all those folks that helped make that happen with you guys. That's amazing. That's really amazing work. Hassan, let's test your microphone again there, my friend. See how it's doing. There you go. I see the mute's off. Can we hear you? You know what? I can tell you there's a whole lot of people out there would love this function to work for politicians, to find a way to make us muted permanently and to have you speak all the time, my friend. But I'm sorry, we're having a technical issue there. We'll keep working on it. We'll keep working on it. So maybe if you have any thoughts in particular you want to share, Hassan, if you could email them or text them to Alexandra, or Yahya, or Marissa, and they could be brought back to us, we can make sure that those are expressed in the course of our conversation here, okay? Because we want to get to the conversation about organizing, which is what I think the video is such a great example of. So we will post a link to the video too in the Facebook stream. For those who are tuning into this on Facebook Live or on Twitter or on YouTube, we'll post a link to this fantastic video done with the fantastic musician, Craig Cardiff. So you can watch it. It's terrific. It's really terrific. So from a standpoint of organizing, this is a great opportunity to bring in my friend, Mavis Finnemore from Acorn Canada, because there are people in this city fighting hard, have been fighting hard for years and years and years. My understanding as an Ottawa Acorn member myself, Mavis, is that we're up around 34,000 members in this city, one of the highest density of Acorn members in Canada. Can you tell us a little bit about what, first of all, what, you know, for those who are tuning in tonight who don't know what Acorn is, maybe give them a brief primer on that. You've got your fantastic Acorn shirt on there, I can see. But if you could also tell us a little bit about what Acorn is seeing around evictions, housing insecurity as a result of COVID. Over to you, my friend.
Okay, well, for people not knowing about Acorn, we basically focus on issues that are of concern for people with low income. Mm-hmm. So we're entirely member driven, so we're not beholden to any politicians or firms or anything. So it's strictly the people who are members who are driving our agenda. And certainly one of the things that is really concerning a lot of low income people, of course, is, you know, the evictions, the COVID evictions. It's frightening because while we did have a moratorium for a while, we had a second quasi moratorium tacked onto it last August. And it was really a sham because, as you know, Katie pointed out, essentially, they were still going through all the motions with the Landlord Tenant Board. However, they were doing it online, which definitely put a lot of people at a disadvantage with lower income. If you're already, you know, having trouble paying rent and food, what makes you think that we're going to have extra money for internet? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're disadvantaged there. And everything except the sheriff showing up at the door was still going on. Mm-hmm. And people knew this because they were all getting the eviction notices, etc. So you have this great fear building up, and they're all frantically looking around trying to find ways to find money to pay rent, jobs, what have you. And it's not just happening for a lot of people. As we know, that the people who were most affected by COVID were all of the people in the lower ranks of income. Mm-hmm. And these are also people where the jobs have not necessarily come back. Mm-hmm. So you're in an awful situation where you're trying very hard, but it's just not happening for you. And then you're seeing your own governments seemingly piling on, you know, jumping in with the developers to help them kick you out. And all of this is happening in a backdrop of not only COVID, but we're already in a housing crisis. Mm-hmm. Prior to all of this. So this is like, I guess you could call it a perfect storm of the worst possibilities for lower income people. And when it comes to what Acorn is seeing, of course, is some very frightened people. Right. And we're trying to do, you know, a few things for people. We're good at organizing. doing our demonstrations to bring out the knowledge of what's actually going on to the public. Because as others have pointed out, a lot of people don't know how desperate things are for people on low income, how you sometimes have to do terrible things, juggling, do I pay rent or do I, get food? Who would want to have a terrible choice like that?
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, as I said, some people have not got jobs back. They've had hours dialed back. They can't put together enough hours from enough jobs to make 40 hours. So you're having people who are falling behind.
Mm-hmm.
And some landlords have really jumped on that as a good way to show you the door. And we've been organizing, as I said, and we've been asking at all levels of government, from the municipal level, we were asking for a rent bank. At the provincial level, we were begging them, please put a moratorium, a real moratorium on evictions,
Mm-hmm.
because this is, going to put these people in the worst possible place to suddenly either be homeless or try and make it in a shelter where you have even greater chance of getting COVID. These are terrible choices that nobody really should be forced to go into. And we've also tried at the federal level, seeing if they could give some kind of rent relief by attaching it to something they were already doing with CERB.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't really got any kind of major response that way. I don't know what people are waiting for. Are they waiting for this big pile of people to show up at the curb, put a tent on their front lawn? I don't know. How much more really can you do? I mean, we do our organizing, we door knock all over the place. So that our comments about poor people are authentic because we have talked to them at the door.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, we have organized an awful lot, trying to get people educated and politicians educated too, so they know what's going on. Because I think a lot of times, when I look at our legislature and stuff like that, they don't reflect people who are on minimum wage. It's a whole room full of lawyers, right? So they may not know what is going on in somebody's daily life. They may think, oh, it's no problem, just move if you're having a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's nothing to move to. I hate to tell you that. The next place is down the road in the woods. You set up your tent. And I think that that's pretty much what we have to keep on doing. We have to keep the pressure on. We have to keep bringing this forward to people, because sooner or later, as I say, we can see it's going up.
Right. So,
and I think the bad part I'm seeing is it's not just single people, it's families now.
Absolutely.
Who are ending up in shelters and who are, as Hassan was saying, I mean, these are students too who are all impacted. This is our next generation. We're already disadvantaging them.
Mm-hmm.
And this to me is like criminal. We're hurting our own kids at this rate too.
Well, and Hassan had some difficulty with his mic, so I just want to read a statement that he sent to us and commit to him. We're going to be doing, we run a podcast from our MPP office. It's called Troublemaker Radio. I encourage everybody out there to read and subscribe, because sometimes we think you have to make a little trouble to get things done. So Hassan, I just want you to know, regardless of whether your mic works tonight, we're going to follow up with you so you can have a dedicated interview, so your voice is part of this. But what you just texted us was, I just want our government to know that 25% of people experiencing eviction is ultimately a national crisis. So if I'm understanding you correctly, my friend, you're saying what's happening in your classroom, what's happening in your school ought to be seen as a national crisis. And you're making me think, like, if this was happening in more affluent neighborhoods in our city and in this province, it probably would get treated like a national crisis, but it should be treated like one now. I take your point. Jessica, you'll be back in a second. I want to maybe then think a little, there you are, Jessica. Great. Okay. So we're starting to the conversation. Sorry, I threw you at the worst possible moment. We're starting to talk about organizing. We've heard from the fantastic group of folks at Adult High School about what they did to get the message out, what they did to stir the pot, to get people to pay attention. We've heard from Mavis about what Acorn's doing to raise the alarm bells. But you have a particular story in your own writing, about seniors and their rights to housing. I wonder if you could share that story and how it became a provincial concern, because you helped elevate those voices and give them a platform in the legislature. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Thanks, Joel. I was going to try and turn my light on because I didn't turn my light on at the start when it was still light outside. Yes, we had a situation about 2 years ago where we had 100 seniors living in a retirement home whose building was sold, and the seniors were told that they had to leave. And it was deeply upsetting for these people. Some of them never recovered. They moved into a new home, and we were in touch with many of them, and some of them unfortunately died. It was because they saw the home that they were living in at the time, that was going to be their forever home. That's where they wanted to stay. And as a result of that, there was one woman, Betty, and her daughter, Diane, who lived across the street, who said, actually, we're not going to move. We're going to stay here, and we're going to make this new corporate landlord evict us. And the corporate landlord couldn't do that because they had no grounds. And Betty is still living there, and she's 98 years old. And it also, because of the work that we did with that community, we learned a lot about the rights that retirement home residents don't have. Mm-hmm. We worked with the Advocacy Centre for the Elderly to develop a bill in partnership with other loved ones and retirement home residents to provide seniors with better protections from eviction. And there's two things that we introduced in this bill. One is that seniors who live in retirement homes deserve to have the same rights as any other tenant, because right now they don't. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing, I know, unbelievable, right? These people are on fixed income. And then the second thing is we wanted to stop this really unfair price gouging that happens when someone moves into a retirement home. Their rent is set because they are actually a tenant, but the retirement home owner can increase the fees that they pay for, providing someone with meals or services like medication. They can increase that as much as they want. There's no controls over it. And we were hearing stories of people on fixed income who were getting $120 price increases a month for meals. And then they discovered the person living right next to them was paying half as much. There was no transparency at all. So we introduced a bill to say, no, that can't happen anymore. Services need to also be under a rent control system, just like the rent, so that if you move into a retirement home, you know how much it's going to cost for you to live there. Makes a lot of sense. If you're interested in knowing about the bill, please reach out to us and we'll tell you more about it.
Okay. Thanks, Jessica. So this is a story of people organizing and people raising an alarm bell and people utilizing an MPP office to get that voice heard and to get a project of law forward. We're getting some comments on our stream, and I think they're very important comments. And I want to throw back, Alexander, to you or Yahia or Marissa or Hassan to talk about what people are saying. We need to also have a conversation about systemic racism and the COVID emergency. It strikes me every time I've had the good fortune pre-pandemic to go to the adult high school. I've had the opportunity to talk to people who are generally, I love it because most of Ottawa politics, if I can be candid with you, is a snowstorm. Most of it is a lot of white people like me in political office. But the great thing about the adult high school is people are often coming from all over the world. People are coming from all kinds of different ethnicities and backgrounds, and the conversations are rich. They're very, very, very rich. But I'm wondering if any of the folks from the adult high school want to reflect on whether, as people are commenting on our stream tonight as we're broadcasting this, systemic racism isn't a really integral part of the evictions crisis and the housing crisis.
It is.
I'll pass the mic to go ahead and grab it, whoever wants it.
I can definitely support that.
Yeah,
I know that in Herongate, we definitely saw that was an area, of course, it was full of immigrants. And because it was cheaper for them to live there. And I did see a difference in behavior towards the immigrants than towards me. They were much more polite to me, but they were absolutely dismissive of anything else, of any of my neighbors who might be coming from Somalia or Costa Rica, whatever. It was pretty obvious.
And Mavis, you're talking about the biggest mass eviction in Canadian history since
Yeah.
Africville. 400 people losing their homes in Heron Gate, where you were a resident. And, you know, from your perspective, having lived there and knowing families, this was a disproportionate impact that hurt racialized tenants.
Oh, I'm quite sure that this would never have happened in a very white neighborhood.
Wouldn't have happened in the Glebe.
No.
Wouldn't have happened in Westboro. Much as I love residents from all over this riding, but it wouldn't have, you're saying.
No, I don't think so, because I got the impression when they were dealing with me, as I say, they were very polite. They were very careful with what they said to me, because they knew I would come back and say, no, that's not true. That's a lie. And because I know that they were literally frightening people out of there, saying, listen, if you complain, you know, we're going to complain to, about immigration, or we're going to see that you get thrown out and no one else will give you a place to live. A lot of these people came from, you know, regimes that did not respect law and certainly did not respect poor people. So they would believe anything like that.
The landlord we're talking about here is Timber Creek. They're operating under a different name now, but this is who you're talking about, and agents for this particular.
They're now
name.
called Hazelview.
Hazelview.
And I think it's because they had such bad press attached to Timber Creek. But
Amazing how that can
that's
happen.
just my opinion. But yes, and we did have, as mentioned to you earlier, a meeting about 2 nights ago, in which we did talk about the evictions there. And I was shocked really to find out that its director of that area was saying that there were no real evictions there. And I couldn't believe my ears. And he did it twice, not just to me, but also to one of the other ladies who was my neighbor.
Can I add something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Please, Marissa, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I was at, I used to go to St. Patrick's High School, and it's close to Heron Gate.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of friends that lived in those houses when, during the time that they were getting evicted and stuff. And just based off like that situation alone, and knowing the people, or knowing some people that were getting evicted during that time, like it did take a toll on them mentally. I remember not seeing one of my friends at school for about 2 weeks because where she had moved was now in Orleans. And so it was like a really long commute to come to the South. And she just like expressed to me that like her parents didn't really like have the money to, you know, travel that far. And yes, you have a Presto, but even if you do come to school, you're going to be late regardless because of that long commute. So I just think there was a lot of like, there was a lot of challenges on students as well. And I wanted to also add back to what Yahia said, like a couple minutes ago, about how like those resources, people don't know about them. And also with how the sheriffs were speaking to tenants that were immigrants, like they usually, especially my mother was an immigrant. My entire like aunts and uncles, they were all immigrants. And luckily, like my mom, she came here when she was like pretty young. So she kind of started to develop in this country, but for most of my friends, it's not the same case. Therefore, they don't know about all these, they don't know the information. They don't know who to reach out to. And because of that, there's a lack of feeling safe, even when you know you're not in a safe space. I feel like if these things were happening and people knew who to reach out to at the time, it would take a lot of like stress off of their backs because they have children. So it's not just affecting one person, it's affecting many. And then it affects a lot of other people, even like family members or just other friends too. Like hearing about it is just very like sad, you know? But yeah, just wanted to add that.
Thank you,
Like from an educational perspective,
please.
COVID has exacerbated inequities, like disproportionately racialized communities are being impacted by this. Like when we look at access to Chromebooks, access to Wi-Fi, technology, virtual learning. I mean, families who are at home with kids, they're working full time, their kids are studying, they have no childcare, and they don't have enough computers. I mean, so it's COVID evictions, 100%. But especially when we look at the school system, I mean, if there's going to be future virtual learning, if this is going to be part of the government's plan in the future to carry on with it past COVID, we really need to think about how to make sure each student has equal opportunity, equitable opportunities to technology, to learning supports. You know, ELL learners, if you don't have additional support at home from parents who can, who can speak the language, who know how to work the system, this is going to have a huge impact. The decisions we make in education today and how we move out, how we roll out of COVID is going to impact the world. It's going to continue to exacerbate this stuff. So we talk about equity all the time in the classroom. We talk about the focus on social justice, but like there needs to be action on these pieces, and definitely, rallying the provincial government to support initiatives that are right for all students, and considering, just the disadvantages that so many students are facing. So I think that's a really, really important point when we're thinking about education, not only COVID evictions, but how all inequities have been exacerbated by this situation.
100%. Thank
Can
you,
I
Alexandra.
add on that,
Please,
on
Katie.
Zan's point? Yeah, and I would say the two lenses, like the education piece and how that intersects with housing. And our team's been talking a lot lately about state-enabled renoviction, state-enabled like displacement of full communities, almost always racialized communities. You mentioned earlier looking at Africville in Nova Scotia. Then we think about Little Burgundy in Montreal. Then we think about Herongate. Then we think about Manor Village a year after. And Le Breton Flats. Of those examples, 3 are in Ottawa. And the idea that we continue to use housing as a way to disadvantage people, because one of the biggest ways people have gained wealth, and predominantly white people, has been generational wealth transfer through mortgage. And so when we think about the impact of that and the fact that most people that I know my age who have gotten into the housing market, it's because they got a big, helpful down payment from family, because that was the only way they could get into an escalating housing market. And so that piece, plus the fact that we are continuing to financialize housing, and it is a profit-driven process and industry. We're in a rental market housing boom right now, and it's because renovictions are happening, people are getting buildings demolished and new ones are being put up and charging exorbitant profit. And at the same time, we see, I think, a real failure of government to step up and say, hey guys, you're making a lot of money. We're going to put some regulation on that. And you need to actually have some giving back to the community, that it's not charity. It's about having an equitable community. So, in the conversations around what affordable units look like in an inclusionary zoning context, I don't think that's a silver bullet by any stretch. But when we start to talk about that, there's a lot of language thrown around, oh, let's have it for 15 years, which makes zero sense, because 15 years is right about the time when you pay off the mortgage for that building and you start to profit. We need to make sure that affordability for housing is baked in perpetuity, and that people can't jack up the rent as soon as somebody moves out. I know Acorn's done a ton of great advocacy and campaigns on this piece. And I think it's something that until we navigate this financializing housing piece, we're not going to be able to get ahead of this, because in my humble opinion, I suppose, the housing is the backbone of all of this, right? So much of COVID, long-term care, it's a housing issue. Like, these are all part of that housing spectrum. And if we can get housing right, if we can get it affordable and safe and appropriate for people, we can help all those other kind of pieces of equity start to become a lot more easier to be able to tackle.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. There is a political economy to this. And a member of our city, and someone here will remind me, this fantastic person's name used to be the UN Special Rapporteur for Housing, and is one of the major people interviewed in a great documentary called Push. Katie, who was that person?
Is that Layla?
Leilani Farha.
There you go. I'm sorry, Leilani, for forgetting your name, but that is a terrific documentary. I encourage you to watch, that sheds light on the political economy of just the vicious side of capitalism. Okay, Hassan, I think I understand that you've got a way to contribute here. Can we hear you, my friend? We got to take the mute off unless you're. It's so, you know what, it sometimes the technology world is cruel, but I'll keep talking. If I hear you, I'm going to stop talking and make sure you get your opportunity. But as I said before, we're going to be doing a conversation, you and me, so the folks get tuned into Troublemaker Radio can hear it from your perspective of the role you played in this incredible project. Okay, I want to again acknowledge that one person wrote in and said the following. I think it's a fitting note on which to spend our last 5 minutes, or even 10. If we want to go a little bit past time, that's fine. Someone wrote in to say, as community advocates, what would you like to see us do regarding activism in our communities, other than writing to politicians to change public policy? So to me, I mean, that points back to a strategy of community organizing. Jessica, I know in Toronto from talking to you and some of our friends like MPP Rima Burns McGowan, MPP Suze Morrison, MPP Chris Glover, there are active tenant unions forming, rather like, you know, Mavis has talked about in Acorn's case. I was wondering if you could tell us the story of tenant unions, and if people inspired by what our friends at Adel High School have done or what Mavis is doing with Acorn want to get active in that model. How would you go about doing such a thing?
Thanks for that question. I just want to do a shout out to Acorn. If there are people out there who are looking at getting more engaged in this issue of stopping evictions and making housing more affordable, Acorn is a fantastic group to connect with. We've seen many people, renters in Toronto, organize with their neighbours. If the majority of people who rent live in bigger purpose-built rentals, you know, 6 units, 20 units, in some cases 700, 800 units. Organizing with your neighbors is a very effective way to stop a landlord from breaking the rules, from illegally evicting you, from making you pay for things like parking that you didn't pay for before. There are a lot of victories that you can have. And it can start out with just reaching out and putting a piece of paper under people's doors, introducing yourself, and in this time, having a safe conversation online and sharing contact information. Just starting there can really make a landlord, a property manager, sit up and listen. They do retaliate, there's no doubt about it. You have to prepare for that, but you are always stronger together. Toronto, maybe Ottawa has done this too, but in Toronto, tenants associations groups have sprung up in a lot of buildings, and now we have numerous citywide or neighborhood-wide tenants associations. You know, a dozen tenants associations having a rep for their community. So if a bill comes up or if there's a big mass eviction being planned, people can coordinate with each other across streets and across neighborhoods, which gives us a whole lot of power, not just when it comes to, you know, fighting an eviction, but also if we're looking at taking back power at the next city election or the next provincial election, or if we want to pass a big provincial bill, which will begin to, you know, change the playing field to make it more favorable to people who are lower income, moderate income, people who are renters. Right. But it's starting with knowing your neighbors and starting to talk to them. That's always where it starts.
Mavis, I think you're nodding. Go get in there. Plan. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's essentially the Acorn plan, and we already have also started reaching out to our allies also within Ottawa as well. And that's one of the things I really liked when I was still living in Herongate and we were starting to demonstrate. We had a good membership that came from all parts of Ottawa to our demonstrations. And that was really something that made me feel good inside. I had people who were on my side, not just one or two or in my neighborhood, but a lot of people. And this is one thing, as Jessica's pointing out, there's more and more of this organizing going on. Politicians at all stripes cannot afford to ignore things like this because it's growing and it's going to come back at you one way or the other in elections. And certainly this is something that we're looking at too. And certainly our own people are talking that way too. You have to, be able to use whatever influence or whatever you have for good. And if we can get out there and demonstrate and keep on focusing on that and keep talking, to politicians, et cetera, to see if they can see a change in the law somewhere like we have in the past. This is basically what you have to do. You have to keep the pressure on. I mean, this is essentially, we like to see ourselves as the voice of lower income people, because there isn't a heck of a lot of people, big groups with money coming out in favor of protecting low income people. And we just feel that we have to be there. We have to have our voice at the table.
Understood. So what I can maybe encourage folks to do, inspired by what Mavis just said, go and check out Acorn Canada. Go and type into the Google tenants unions, because what I've understood from watching Jessica Holforth in the legislature and others from Toronto is, in many cases, Jessica, if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure MPP Burns McGowan, Rima, our friend in Beaches East York, has been part of these tenant unions that have actually been there when they've tried to do these quick evictions and has actually stymied and blocked evictions from taking place. Am I wrong, Jessica? I see you shaking your head.
I agree. So one thing that we've started to do, and Rima's been doing this too, is participating as a witness in landlord tenant board hearings, because we are hearing anecdotally adjudicators making decisions which make you wonder, and also adjudicators dismissing cases maybe because a tenant couldn't make it in time for a good reason, or it just happened so quickly. There's a language barrier. And so having a witness there, someone who, has access to power, can ensure that, at least somewhat more fair hearing can be had. And Rima is very active in the massive amount of organizing that's happening in her community around beaches to ensure that tenants are given the, a fair hearing and that they get to keep their homes. I can also, we have a list of resources on our website, and I'll put a link in the chat. So if people are interested in finding out a little bit more about organizing tenants associations and whatnot, just click on the link.
All right. So we've got the link with Acorn. We've got the link that Jessica's going to provide it. Friends from adult high schools, we're turning to organizing. What's on? We're all curious to know. You put out this fantastic video. What's on your minds now as next steps for this project? Over to you folks.
Just connecting back to what the other guests have talked about, when we think about systems of oppression and white supremacy, that they function through interrelated systems that are dynamic, they're interrelated, they reinforce one another. And so I really see capacity building at the high school level in particular, looking at classes focused on civic action, social justice and equity courses. Even, our class was individuals and families in a diverse society. It was a CanFam class, but we took civic action on an issue that was important. It's an opportunity right now in education to let go of facts, to let go of, I know that sounds bad, not all facts, but to let go of kind of this banking model where we're trying to stuff these facts in the heads of students and to focus on skill-based learning, project-based learning, which has an impact on issues students are actually facing in the moment, instead of talking about, issues that happened in the past or that are not related. It can be really sensitive and triggering to talk about issues that students are facing, but if you approach it in a respectful way, you ask permission, you build community in the classroom, it can have a huge impact on individuals, on teachers, and on the community at large. So I would just say, that connection between these systems of oppression, seeing how they're interrelated, and then working together. So capacity building, community outreach, there's so much space for that right now, even though it's a stressful time in education to be a student and a teacher. This is the time to pivot, to take out what we don't need, what is not worthless, what is maybe not quite as important, and to focus on prioritizing skills, capacity building, civic action, equity.
Amen to all of that. What a fitting note on which to end. So I just want to this night wouldn't have happened were it not for two groups of people. One, our friends from the adult high schools. So massive tip of the hat to all of you for the leadership you've shown. And this is going to contribute to more organizing in our city. And that's a great cause of you. I also must say nothing, believe me, were the technology left to me, this would not be happening. Samia Raeda has curated and created this space, and I am eternally grateful, Samia, to your work in helping to pull this together. Thank you, Mavis from Acorn. Thank you, Katie from the Alliance to End Homelessness. Marissa, Yahia, Hassan, I'm going to keep true to that promise, Austin. I promise you. We're going to figure out a time so we can talk. So your story's in the record of this, my friend. Don't worry. But thank you for this. We are going to be rebroadcasting clips of this with permission. We have to make sure that our friends participants are cool with it. But we want to have memory of this in our podcast, which again is called Troublemaker Radio. You can find it at any of the podcast platforms because we have to push this. This is an urgent conversation. So I want to thank our guests for being part of that urgency. I want to thank you at home for caring about this issue. Let's keep organizing. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep politicians on a short leash. Jessica and I don't have a problem with that. So let's make sure all of us are. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Good night. Thank you so much for tuning in. Jessica, thanks in particular for tuning in.